How to Save Marvel and DC Comics in 2024, or How to Give Advice Neither Publisher Will Ever Take. Once again, it's that time of the year where people talk about saving the totally not failing, creatively stagnant comic book industry that's doing better than it's ever done before. I swear, there's so much talent and money, it's a veritable bukkake of success. Oh my god, we're getting destroyed by manga, but it's fine. It's fine, it's totally fine. Nothing to see here. Graham McMillan wrote this piece as a follow-up to the industry-wide implosion caused by Mark Millar telling the truth. The comic book industry is a bit of a mess. At first, there were detractors who attacked Millar, but when he wouldn't bend the knee, many of these people admitted he had a point. Some of them had waited years to say that, but they were afraid of getting canceled. A couple of months later, and we're still dealing with the fallout. I've also seen people trying to figure out how to grow the comic book industry. I've said for years that the industry isn't really dying, it's just stagnant. It's looking more like it's going the way of vinyl, where it'll be profitable enough to keep making comics, but they won't have the mass appeal they once did. This happens with a lot of things, but it's ironic with the comic book industry because the characters have never been more popular, and because the medium itself has great success in the YA graphic novel market and with Japan's imported manga. It's the American comic book industry that has a problem drawing in new readers and keeping their current ones. Part of that is due to the internal politicking and sniping between creators, but the other part is the books themselves. There is no draw for most of the books. McMillan explains, quote, "Former Marvel heavyweight Mark Millar suggested that big-name creators return to Marvel and DC, saying that excitement is contagious. Big names on big characters is a very fun idea. That led other creators to respond, including Scott Snyder's contention that a shift also needs an ideological shift inside the publishers and among readers alike to truly land. While specific prescriptions for the problem differed, one thing appeared to be agreed upon. Something needed to change, and quickly. Yeah, namely that the publishers need a sense of direction. That seems to be the core missing part for so many books. I look at the books, I read the summaries on the publisher's own sites, and I keep asking, who is this for? It's just not clear who's the target audience. Sometimes they luck up and get a hit, like with Daniel Warren Johnson's Transformers, but a lot of books just seem to be published to publish them. I couldn't tell you the hook for most of them. What is the draw? That's not a rhetorical question. What about the books would make someone want to read them? Mark Millar had the idea of making the draw be the big-name characters with big-name creative teams. Hire people who can pull in an audience, pay them well, and maybe that will bring an interest back to comics. However, McMillan points out that DC Comics' recent Dawn of DC arc is doing that now, but hasn't been mentioned by anyone supporting Millar's idea. Quote, "Part of it might be that Dawn of DC didn't shift things enough for that audience. They wanted something with the impact of, say, 2011's New 52 relaunch that reestablished DC as the biggest publisher in the business, at least temporarily. And possibly, another might be that the big names that are part of the Dawn of DC initiative aren't who those demanding this kind of thing think of as big. I don't think people actually liked the New 52. It had an impact, mostly that people were confused about the continuity, didn't like the changes to the characters, and missed the legacy element lost in the reboot. It also didn't last that long. In 2016, barely 5 years after New 52 debuted, DC Comics undid it with DC Rebirth and restored most of what had been changed. They planned to launch another New 52-style shakeup with the 5G initiative, but that imploded before anything got published. It got partially rebranded as Future State, and editor-in-chief Dan DiDio wound up without a job. Rebirth is closer to what Millar talked about in tone, but in terms of talent, the closest thing I can think of that matches his idea was the creation of Mark Alessi's CrossGen, where a bunch of top talents were brought in to handle the entire line of brand new characters. That's not what DC did with the Dawn of DC. The only OG big-name talents with massive fan appeal I've seen are Jeff Johns and Mark Waid. But it also comes down to how the books are promoted. It won't help to play nostalgia if no one knows the books are out. And this is the next problem after the stories themselves. Bad marketing. Nobody knows about the books. Even people who follow comics can easily miss things because the news sites are mostly clickbait now, and the publishers barely mention anything. How is it that you have two massive film production companies at your disposal and no one at Marvel or DC Comics have thought to do deep dives into the creation of comics, legendary stories, or just do basic interviews with their talent? The easiest thing for them to do to build interest in their comics is to make videos about the stories, the characters, and the creators, but they rarely do this. Where is their version of Manben? That's a Japanese show about manga created by the legendary Naoki Urasawa. He sends a crew to some mangaka studio, films them making their comics for a couple of days, and then interviews them about their process, their background, and their inspiration. I've watched all the episodes I could find about 3 or 4 times now. Why can't we do the same thing here? Find someone with an iota of charisma who also makes comics and have that person interview comic creators. That's an easier way to reach a new, younger audience than whatever the hell they've been doing. Speaking of younger people, quote, my attention turned to something that Grant Morrison wrote in a recent newsletter. Asked about how they fixed the industry, Morrison argued it's for a younger generation to fix whatever seems broken to them, adding that comics, like pop music, rely on fresh voices to sing the old standards in a way that resonates with a new audience. That might be the answer to re-energizing Marvel and DC in terms of sales, if not the vocal minority of those wishing Joss Whedon came back to comics. The idea of finding voices that resonate with readers in such a way as to build a new audience that will, ideally, grow to sample other comics and become voracious readers across the board. Except, they've tried that for the last decade, and it's failed. It's not just enough to find new voices. You need to find creative voices who actually have something to say, have a passion for the medium, and aren't obsessed over a handful of pet issues. The publishers also need to give people a chance to grow by leaving them on a book instead of bouncing them from title to title. That way people can develop their voices and styles and potentially give you something you've never seen before. I agree with McMillan that you can have both big-name creators and new talent, as long as both have room to do their thing. I also agree that readers should be more open to new talent and ideas instead of just wanting to rehash of what they grew up reading. However, that can't happen with this kind of attitude. Quote, just imagine an industry where publishers have the freedom to create the kind of experimental work that fans consistently dream of returning to without having to cater to fans who demand the kind of work that was experimental decades earlier. I don't have to imagine. That's how these companies have operated for years. Like I said in a previous video, there's a difference between responding to someone not liking your work by saying, okay, I guess it's not for you, versus preemptively saying, it's not for you. I don't expect to be the target reader for every book published, but I also don't expect to be attacked because I'm not the target reader. No, you don't have to constantly cater to me, but you also don't have to be snide about it. After all, I might like the story and want to buy your book. The American comic book industry has a problem with gaining new readers. Whatever they can do to bring positive attention and genuine interest to their books, they should do. It's not like people don't read comics. Even though Japan's print numbers have taken a hit, like all print media, manga is still popular and constantly pulls in new, younger readers. People do read comics if you make stories they like. I think focusing more on the art, since it's a visual medium, telling more varied and relatable stories, and not fixating on playing identity politics from either side of the aisle would help make American comics more popular. It also wouldn't hurt to let people know that the books are out by promoting the books and the creators on social media. You know, the thing used by millions of young people. But what do I know? I'm just some guy.